In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. That's Winston Churchill, and it really sets the scene for what we're diving into today. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we take source material, often complex stuff, and, well, we try to pull out the key insights for you. It's a shortcut to getting properly informed. And for those of you perhaps preparing for exams like the UPSC, or frankly, anyone just trying to track critical global events, this is for you. Today's definitely one of those days. We're digging into a really volatile situation, a real quagmire developing in the Middle East. We've got some fascinating, sometimes contradictory sources on the latest between Iran and Israel, and this huge dilemma facing a former U.S. president. Our analysis today draws heavily from current affairs reporting, including a detailed piece and punchline.
Absolutely. Our goal here is really to critically analyze what's happening. We'll be looking at the immediate military back and forth, the sometimes erratic diplomacy, and of course, the huge implications for the region, for global energy. This isn't just skimming headlines. It's about understanding how all these pieces connect in a really high-stakes game. Crucial stuff for understanding international relations today.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, or at least the recent trigger. We have reports of an Israeli blitzkrieg against Iran about 5 days ago. For anyone unfamiliar, blitzkrieg means a really fast, overwhelming attack. What are our sources saying about how that actually went?
Well, this is where it gets interesting immediately. The narratives are just completely different. Russian media, for one, reported that this blitzkrieg was, quote, failing spectacularly.
Yeah.
They made some really big claims, like Israel's Rafael weapons complex destroyed, the Haifa oil refinery on fire, the Iron Dome, their missile shield breached. Even saying Israel's air superiority is just a figment of imagination.
Wow, those are huge claims, very different from what you might normally hear. So how did Iran respond to this alleged attack? What was their next move?
Iran definitely escalated. On Tuesday, they fired cruise missiles against Israel, which sources say is the first time they've done that directly. And that was followed up by another wave. This time, missiles and drones targeting the Nevatim air base down in southern Israel.
Nevatim, right. That's a major base, isn't it?
It's absolutely critical. It's home to their stealth fighters, transport planes, tanker aircraft, plus all sorts of electronic surveillance gear. Hitting that sends a very strong signal about their capabilities.
Given the history there and, the sensitivity of the region, were there any claims about even more sensitive targets? I mean, nuclear facilities, because that would really raise the stakes.
Yes, exactly. Some Iranian reports did claim seeing, quote, plumes of smoke rising from areas near the Dimona nuclear facility. Now, Dimona is widely believed to be where Israel keeps its nuclear warheads, maybe around 90 of them. So if that's true, even partially, it would be incredibly embarrassing for Israel. They've always maintained that policy of, deliberate ambiguity about their nuclear
Right.
program.
The whole never confirm, never deny thing.
Precisely. And our sources suggest this also highlights a kind of blind spot for former President Trump. He's described as constantly hectoring Iran while sort of ignoring Israel's own clandestine nuclear stockpile. It also makes you wonder about the IAEA, the international watchdog, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So if these Dimona reports have any truth, what does it mean for Israel's nuclear posture? And just to be clear, what kind of capability are we even talking about here?
Well, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SEPI, gives us some context. They estimate Israel's warheads can be delivered up to 4,500 kilometers away. That's using their F-15s, F-16s, F-35 fighter jets. Their land-based Jericho missiles, they have about 50 of those, and also Popeye turbo cruise missiles launched from submarines.
So a pretty significant reach, a clear second strike capability.
Absolutely. So formidable deterrent, and it fundamentally shapes the power dynamics in any kind of negotiation.
Okay, so with all these claims flying around, these attacks, what's the feeling inside Israel's leadership, according to the sources? Are they projecting confidence, or is there maybe some worry underneath?
The sources suggest that, quote, rational minds among the Israeli elite feel worried. There seems to be a recognition that Iran won't just back down easily. Danny Yadam, who used to head Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, is quoted saying something like, Iranians will not kneel. They will not raise the flag of surrender. They will not give in.
That's a pretty stark assessment from someone like him. It suggests they understand this could be a long haul.
Exactly, a recognition of Iran's resolve.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the diplomacy, because that's running parallel to all this military action, right? Where do things stand with mediation efforts?
Well, this is quite fascinating. An NBC report came out suggesting that Israel, working through Western mediators, actually asked Iran to stop the retaliatory attacks.
Asked them to stop while things were still escalating.
Yes, and not only stop, but also return to nuclear negotiations. It's a really critical detail suggesting a desire, maybe, to find an off-ramp, even amidst the public conflict.
That's unexpected. How does that square with former President Trump's very public, very different kind of messaging around that time?
Well, our source connects those dots. It suggests this behind-the-scenes ask might explain Trump's, shall we say, bombastic post on Truth Social that Sunday.
Right.
He claimed Israel and Iran were basically going to cut a deal with his help. He wrote, "We will have peace soon between Israel and Iran. Many calls and meetings now taking place."
He even compared it to brokering peace between India and Pakistan, didn't he?
He did, suggesting a similar success was imminent here. Quite an optimistic take given the circumstances.
But did that optimism last? Or did the grim reality of the situation start to bite?
It seems reality might have, quote, dawned on Trump shortly after. The source points out that the Iranians are unlikely to just forget or forgive things like the assassinations of their commanders or, the civilian deaths and destruction from the Israeli strikes. These strikes reportedly hit not just military sites, but also residential areas in Tehran and elsewhere. So these aren't grievances that just disappear with a quick negotiation. It complicates any simple deal.
Okay, so that puts Trump in a really tough spot, doesn't it? What's the core dilemma for him now?
The big decision, it seems, is how to help Israel avoid what's described as an attritional war. A long, grinding conflict designed to wear down the enemy. And the pressure on him to intervene militarily, potentially with U.S. forces, is reportedly mounting. Our sources mentioned his obligations to what they call all three segments of the Israel lobby: Zionists, evangelical Christians, and wealthy Jewish elites active in U.S. politics.
So significant domestic political pressures playing into this foreign policy crisis.
Absolutely. It's a very complex tightrope he's walking.
And then we had the G7 summit in Canada around that time. That seemed to offer a window into his mood, didn't it?
It really did. The source says the pendulum is wildly swinging in Trump's mercurial mind. He was apparently quite irritable at the G7, cut his trip short. And then he got into that very public, nasty quarrel with President Macron of France, all because Macron apparently commented that Trump was rushing back to work on a ceasefire.
Right, I remember that. Trump didn't take kindly to that suggestion. What did he post?
Oh, he went straight to Truth Social, quite angry. He wrote something like, "Publicity-seeking President Emmanuel Macron mistakenly said I left the G7 to work on a ceasefire. Wrong. He has no idea why I am now on my way to Washington. Much bigger than that. Stay tuned."
Much bigger than that.
Okay.
But the posts didn't stop there, did they? It seemed to escalate quite rapidly online.
No, not at all. It was quite a flurry. About 4 hours later, another post clarifying, "I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks. This is just more highly fabricated fake news. If they want to talk, they know how to reach me." And then he added something about a deal they should have taken.
Okay, so pushing back hard on the diplomacy angle then.
Very hard. And then 7 hours after that, a new post boasting, "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. American-made stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA."
Quite a shift in tone. And then it got even more direct, right? A specific threat.
Yes, just minutes later, a direct threat aimed at Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Trump wrote, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but is safe there. We are not going to take him out, kill. At least not for now." He then added conditions like no missiles at civilians or U.S. soldiers, saying, "Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter."
Wow. Killed, in parentheses. That's extraordinary for presidential communication.
Yeah.
And then the final capstone.
7 minutes later, just 2 words in all caps: unconditional surrender.
Unbelievable. From suggesting peace talks to demanding unconditional surrender in what, less than a day?
It highlights just how volatile and personalized this diplomacy, or lack thereof, had become. Real-time brinkmanship via social media.
So, faced with that demand unconditional surrender, what was Iran's response? Did they show any sign of obliging?
Zero chance, according to our sources. In fact, the reaction was defiant. Iran's chairman of the Chiefs of Staff, Major General Musavi, said on Tuesday that the attacks so far were just a deterrent warning. He stated that the actual punitive operations were, quote, set to begin soon.
Punitive operations. That sounds ominous.
It does, and he even took the quite dramatic step of publicly advising residents of Tel Aviv and Haifa to, quote, leave these areas for the sake of their lives.
Goodness. So clearly rejecting surrender and signaling readiness for a much bigger fight.
Precisely. a direct counter to the demand for surrender.
Okay, stepping back from the immediate tit for tat, what are the bigger strategic stakes here? Does Iran have a specific red line that, if crossed, would change everything?
Yes, an Iranian commentary highlighted this. It suggests that Israeli strikes hitting Iran's energy infrastructure, oil facilities, ports, especially those near the Persian Gulf, that could shift the nature of the conflict dramatically. That seems to be what Iran identifies as its core strategic red line, attacking their economic lifeline, essentially. That
Yeah.
could risk disrupting global energy markets significantly, too.
So if it's not a conventional war, but maybe not peace either, what kind of conflict are we actually seeing unfold here?
The commentary describes it as a multi-level hybrid conflict, which sounds complex, and it is. It's like a puzzle with different pieces moving at once. You have direct military clashes, yes, but also proxy groups involved, intense diplomatic pressure, maybe even cyber warfare, and this background state of a cold peace, like a really tense calm all happening simultaneously.
A hybrid conflict. Okay, and the analysis also mentioned Israel's ability to sustain this.
Right. It estimates that Israel cannot endure a prolonged high-intensity conflict. That suggests a potential vulnerability for Israel if things drag out or escalate significantly across multiple fronts.
So even if they reach some kind of ceasefire, it might not actually mean real stability, more like just pausing the hybrid conflict.
That seems to be the assessment. A ceasefire would likely be, as the source puts it, a tense calm or a cold peace, not true stability. What's emerging is described as a fluid and brutal new balance of power. Basically, the old rules seem to be breaking down. The Persian Gulf security, Israel's situation, the actions of groups and the axis of resistance, and the global energy market, they're not separate issues anymore. They're all interconnected pieces in one simultaneous, very high-stakes game. Expect, more unpredictable shifts, maybe localized fights spelling over.
Okay, so that brings us back to Trump's decision. If there's no easy fix and the situation is this interconnected and volatile, what does that mean for the pressure on him to potentially intervene?
Well, the source concludes that the great dilemma for Trump is that there's no quick fix solution in sight. It's messy. Apparently, on his way back to the U.S. from the G7, Trump said he wanted a real end to the conflict and wasn't really in a mood to negotiate.
Not in a mood to negotiate. That aligns with the later posts.
It does. And German Chancellor Friedrich Merz also noted Trump was considering military options. Plus, significantly, reports indicate the U.S. is rapidly building up its military forces in the Gulf region.
So the military option seems very much on the table, despite the complexities.
It appears so. It's being seriously considered, not just talked about.
But what are the potential downsides? What are the warnings about the U.S. actually jumping in militarily?
The source raises a major warning about the long-term impact. It suggests U.S. intervention could trigger a continental war, something far bigger than just Iran and Israel, a war that could outlive Trump's presidency and destroy his presidency. It explicitly draws an analogy to George W. Bush's 2003 Iraq invasion and its long, costly aftermath.
A forever war scenario, essentially.
Potentially, yes. And it also suggests that such a war would completely consume his agenda. He might have to, quote, forget about America first, MAGI, Ukraine, Taiwan, tariff wars, immigration, inflation, China, etc. Everything else gets sidelined.
Are others echoing these concerns? Allies, voices within the U.S., is there broad support for intervention?
It seems not. European allies definitely aren't lining up behind this. President Macron, for instance, explicitly warned against attempting regime change in Iran through military means. He said it would lead to chaos and that no one can say what comes next. France wouldn't support regional destabilization.
Okay, so pushback from key allies. What about domestically?
Domestically, Vice President J.D. Vance is highlighted as a skeptic. His suspicion of foreign wars apparently stems from his time as a Marine in Iraq. He became disillusioned with interventionist regime change projects and ill-fated forever wars.
So significant skepticism both abroad and potentially within the administration itself. That adds another layer to Trump's dilemma.
Absolutely. It suggests intervention wouldn't be a straightforward or universally popular decision, even among his usual supporters.
Well, this has certainly been a deep dive into an incredibly volatile and unpredictable situation. We've seen conflicting reports, rapid shifts in diplomacy or maybe anti-diplomacy, and yeah, a real Middle East quagmire with no easy answers. It really underscores why staying informed and looking critically at the information you receive is just so vital, especially for those tracking global events closely.
Definitely. What we've mapped out here is this really complex interplay, isn't it? You got the immediate military stuff, the underlying nuclear questions, this highly personalized, almost impulsive diplomacy, all feeding into a new, unstable balance of power. And the risk of miscalculation, or one side accidentally crossing that strategic red line we talked about, it feels incredibly high right now. It's a critical case study in modern conflict.
So, what's the takeaway for you listening to this? Whether you're studying for exams or just trying to understand the world, it's about recognizing how blurred the lines have become. The lines between actual conflict, diplomatic signaling, and frankly, information warfare, official statements, media leaks, even those truth social posts, they're all potentially part of a bigger strategic game now, aimed at shaping how everyone perceives the situation.
Yeah, and that leaves us with a really important question to think about, doesn't it? In these kinds of multi-level hybrid conflicts where everything's murky and information itself is a weapon, how do countries really figure out where their rivals' breaking points are? How do they assess their own vulnerabilities? And maybe critically, how much does all the public shouting and posturing, like we saw, actually influence the final outcome versus the calculations happening behind closed doors?
That's a great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a critical and complex issue. We really hope it's given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of the forces at play. And if you did find this valuable, please do like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment. Let us know if you have questions or other complex topics you'd like us to tackle in future deep dives. Your engagement really helps us keep doing this. Thanks for listening.